It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tools for Living and Parenting series. It's my great pleasure and delight to have on tonight my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Tzvi Gluck. One of the things, Rabbi Tzvi, that we all know that if you don't succeed, like you wrote on the flyer, right? If you don't succeed, try again. And one of the things in our work especially, we need to know to regroup if something doesn't work out and come again. And we had some technical difficulties last time. And thank you very much, Rabbi Tzvi, for taking care of it.
No, listen, it's in life in general, there's always speed bumps. You never know when we're going to hit them. And I think it's a very apropos lesson to what's going on in the world around us today. So for whatever the
Absolutely.
reason, there was last time, and now we're
Our
trying again.
Chachamim said that if somebody, a leader, should ideally have flaws that they have to work their way through in order to appreciate how life goes. I usually like to start with a short vert. I saw a beautiful vert that it says that Moshe Rabbeinu goes to a Haran in Parashat Shmini after they finished the Mishkan, and he said, "Kravel HaMizbeach, go to the Mizbeach." And they were there. Why did he have to tell him to go forward? So Rashi, quoting the Medrash, says that he looked up at the Aron and he saw that it looked to him like the horns of an egel, because he was thinking about the egel azov that he had inadvertently had some tiny part in, and he recoiled. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, "Why are you embarrassed? L'kach nefcharta. We chose you. We chose you, knowing literal pshat is we knew everything about this, but Hashem chose you, so come forward." I saw such a beautiful pshat, Reb Tzvi, that he said, "L'kach nefcharta," because you've had this experience of being involved, even accidentally, somehow in something wrong. You're the best person to be able to help somebody who's coming to bring a carbon because they sinned. So the fact that your flaws make you a better person by nature, and it's the same thing with an organization like that. Reb Tzvi is the CEO of Amudim that does just such incredible work. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Rabbi Sherer was very fond of saying, Reb Tzvi, that you should take care of Reb Yisrael, the individuals, and Klal Yisrael. That's what we always said. Reb Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. That was one of Rabbi Sherer's favorite lines. And Reb Tzvi was doing Reb Yisrael forever, learning from Tzalanga Gesundtiyar and your father. And when Amudim came along, it became Klal Yisrael, but Tzvi never forgets Reb Yisrael as well. Really, it's a pleasure to work with you always, and it's delightful to have you on. One of the things that we learned from Tzvi is that sometimes we have to talk about uncomfortable topics for things to get better. And as much as we would like to avoid them, that's just not the way of the world. And our talk tonight is about mental health, and in light of COVID and how it has affected mental health, what our takeaway lessons are. And part of the uncomfortable talk is about what we discussed, what people in the field of dealing with victims of abuse and domestic violence, is that when people are together, obviously, God forbid, people are stressed, and if people already have difficulties in the first place, it certainly gets exacerbated. And I really would like to hear, you're really at ground zero, at the front line of dealing with Klal Yisrael's issues on a global scale. What is it that you are seeing, Reb Tzvi, and what does the public at large need to know?
So what we're seeing is something unprecedented, something that I don't think we can have ever imagined. I mean, that's the truth. The increase of domestic violence issues, the increase of people not having where to live, of people being stuck at home with their abusers, of people relapsing from addiction, people struggling financially, causing major emotional distress. And it's just compounded. I mean, in the last 4 weeks alone, just in Amudim, we had a 55% increase of new cases compared to last year this time. And it's just
55%.
scarier. Yep.
And you've seen that that's been throughout, since a couple of weeks before Pesach? or has it
It
been just
actually
a little bit?
it started right when Pesach started. That was when it started really picking up, and then the last 2.5 weeks, it just got much worse, and it's just been ongoing. And I mean, Baruch Hashem that we have the most amazing, dedicated staff, and Rabbi Horowitz, you know some of them, you've dealt with them on matters
Absolutely.
that are really,
Yep.
but stepping up to the plate like never before is and it's a real credit to them. I mean, we need more staff, we need more help, we need more support just because of the volume. But what we're seeing now and the stories and the individual situations, and it's everywhere, it's everywhere. I mean, we're speaking to other organizations. And the truth is, we have to look at the bright side of everything. Klal Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, is so busy helping so many amazing causes with the amount of, almanis and yesayim and people that lost their jobs. And that's all so beautiful. But one of the things, and as much as we're making headway, but the stigmatization of mental illness, of abuse, of addiction is still there, that we're just not in those same high waters like others. And it's something that we need to shift.
It's interesting, Tzvi. I had a theory. I've also been noticing, that's why I asked you about the last couple of weeks. I've also noticed a spike, even though this has been going on for 2 months. My theory was, before I had in mind to ask you when we were talking tonight, my theory is, again, it's only a theory, but my theory is that, a month ago when New York was in the midst of, with terrible number and volume of cases and the hospitals melting down, I was thinking that the people who are suffering from abuse at home or have domestic violence or other issues like this didn't feel that they're able to get out yet. And they kind of felt that they were stuck and weren't comfortable even making a phone call or reaching out, not knowing how it would end. And now, perhaps, with people getting out more, people who've been victimized or are having a very difficult time at home with someone at home who has issues might be feeling a little bit more comfortable coming forward. I don't know if that jives with what you're seeing.
It's actually more than you'd believe, because our office in Israel had a very big slowdown, we'll call it. And over the last week, that the Israeli economy and communities have started opening up, the call volume not only started going up, so much so that we've actually launched the same support line that we have in America for people here that we've spoken about. We've launched one in Israel for the English speakers, with Israeli licensed mental health professionals because of that need.
Right.
So
right. And I was concerned. I think it was to be expected, perhaps, that as things ease up a little bit, people will start feeling that it's more important for them to go out, to reach out for help. So what would you advise someone out there who's living with who's, God forbid, chas v'shalom, having abuse in their home, and been traumatized by the fact that they had nowhere to go over these last few weeks? It's got to be the most difficult thing in the world to go reach out for help with a family member, realizing that might wind up in charges against the person. I said at the beginning of Tzvi, straight talk. That's what we have to do. It's not that comfortable, but I think we really need to be open and talk honestly if we want things to improve. How does it work? What does it really look like? If someone is called, if someone puts in a call, let's say to Amudim, or reaches out to a therapist and says, my father's been under stress lately and he's lashing out, he's hurting the children. Like, what does that look like? What does it look like in the real world? What are the consequences for the family? We know that things usually don't get better unless they reach out for outside help. But I'd like the public at large to hear from you, what does it look like?
So, I mean, the first thing is that safety first. And we all have to agree to that. And
Absolutely.
While it might be a difficult process, at the same time, the potential danger in the long run is far worse. Just to go off tangent for a second, just for example, over Pesach, we needed to place over 30 victims of domestic violence and victims of abuse in safe locations because they had nowhere to be, because either the abuser was going to be home for Pesach, whether it's a family member or whatnot. But what my advice to people is as follows. Don't be scared to reach out for help. And I say this on two reasons. It's a very interesting concept that another one of your friends actually taught me, Rabbi Avi Kahan, mentioned something very interesting. Very often, the person who's causing the other person pain, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse, they themselves need help too. And it's not, people say, oh, I'm scared something's going to happen. No. At the end of the day, things might happen. But it's also giving an opportunity for everybody to get help. And yes, sometimes the legal system do have to get involved. But let's be very honest. If they don't get involved at a point where something is happening now, it can only just get worse. At the same time, also, very often, if the legal system doesn't get involved, you still have an opportunity to get people help. So whether it's reaching out to an anonymous support line, whether it's Amudim's anonymous support line, or any other, or a therapist or an organization, and that's why we have the support line, by the way. People could be anonymous. They can call up to hear their options, This is something that we've been working very closely with Shalom Task Force on because of the issues of domestic violence. And we've been doing tremendous trainings, and it's really been amazing, I must say, just seeing what's happening and the people getting help and the emails and the thanks and everything that's coming back in return have just been truly amazing. But people have to understand that they cannot be scared to ask for help. That is what we're there for. Help is available. Being scared to ask for help, unfortunately, has a much bigger consequence later on.
Right now, I want to zero in on this because it is something that comes up very, very often in dealing with families where there's an abuser. I just want to make it clear, just so everybody understands. Therapists are mandated reporters, which means that as a principal of a school, an educator, a professional therapist is obligated to report to the authorities, to report abuse to the authorities. Now, I want to make it clear what you're saying. So if somebody calls Amudim and says, look, I need help, there's someone in our home, but I don't want to divulge my name. How does that work? Are they able to do that? Are they able to get advice without, and in other words, can they think it? This is really important because people, it's a very big barrier because people feel if I call, Child Protective Services is coming right down and our families are all going to be in foster care. So I would like to, these couple of things, Rabbi Tzvi, I think would be so important for the public to hear. Can somebody call anonymously, and does the therapist have to ask, who are you? If the person doesn't want to say, can they access at least the initial help to find out what it looks like? And what does it look like later on? What happens, God forbid, if there's an abuser at home and the authorities are called in? What happens to that family? And how does that work with the legal system as well? Sorry, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, Rabbi Tzvi, but I think it's important.
Not at all.
This is an important conversation.
Rabbi, you said it straight. Straight talk. That's what we do.
Straight talk. Both of us.
First of all,
that's the way we roll.
Anonymous is called anonymous for a reason. There is no caller ID. There is no tracking who the caller is unless they give out their information. And that is why it's called an anonymous support line. So people can call up, speak to a licensed mental health professional, discuss whatever it is that's bothering them. We've had over 1,750 calls on the support line since we launched it. People can be anonymous and discuss it. Either they can get the help that they need, if they need further help, and they are willing to share their information, or give a pseudonym, give a fake name, give an email address that people can create. But absolutely, people can call anonymously. That's why it's called an anonymous support line. That's why it's open 7
days a week. That's very important for people to hear.
It's open 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And we're actually working now on extending it till 1 a.m. We just need volunteers that are mental health professionals to go later. Now, as far as those that do end up in the legal system. So
right.
This is a public discussion, but you asked, so I'm going to answer, okay? The reality is,
it's the only way.
I agree. The reality is this is the big elephant in the room. The concept of child protective services is going to come in with SWAT teams and take away the whole family and destroy everybody. Now, I mean, I'm in this line of work, excuse me, for close to 20 years. Amudim is only open for a little bit under 6. I have yet to see a SWAT team with helicopters and news cameras show up when there's a situation. At the end of the day, are there going to be those few and far between stories where child services might have made a mistake and things did fall through the cracks? Absolutely. But as a general rule, the role of Child Protective Services, or ACS, is to keep children safe. First and foremost is they always try to place children in a situation where there does have to be a removal, chas v'shalom, with other family members. First and foremost, okay? I'm not here to say it's a perfect system, but the fact is that's number one. Number two is,
I just want to interrupt you. Go ahead. Finish up. I want to say something. Go ahead. Finish up, please. Number two.
And the other thing, to be realistic, is that in most cases, whether we like it or not, the fact remains the criminal component of these cases end up getting dropped relatively quickly because the families change their mind, whether it's pressure from other people, whether it's the victims aren't able to give full testimony. I'm not saying I'm happy about that. I'm just stating a fact. So when people come in with all these fear factors, a lot of them are just not true. And it's more of like the fear is what's scarier than actually reaching out for help. I'm sorry, please. What was your question?
Rabbi, if I go offline, it might really be, I don't know if you have this information on your website, but I think I would be glad to partner with you on it if you'd like to really put out a paper, to the public as to what it looks like. I know we can't write everything there, but I think a lot of these, the fact that they can call and don't have to divulge their name, and therefore that it's not going to be automatically reported, I think is important information to share with the public. What you mentioned about the system, that no system is perfect. I had the schus to present together with Rabbi David Kohn-Shlita, who made that amazing video for Amudim, that Rabbi Avikan, who you mentioned, was on. So it was probably 15, 20 years ago when, and we did a talk with Rabbanim in the White Shul. There were 150, 200 Rabbanim there. And Rabbi David Kohn spoke about the need to go to to report to the authorities. And someone raised their hand in good faith. It wasn't an inappropriate question at all. He said, listen, Rabbi David, we know there are some false accusations sometimes. So I was presenting on prevention. I was next after Rabbi David. Rabbi David was talking halacha and everything. So I was wondering how he would answer that. And Rabbi David said, typical Rabbi David, he said, yeshivas aren't perfect. That's what Rabbi David said. Yeshivas aren't perfect. And I have a lot of kindness that I have complaints with the way some schools are doing certain things. But every one of my grandchildren goes to a yeshiva. So, what he said there's a system, and the system is not perfect. But we know anecdotally from experience, of dealing with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, that without the system, it's a disaster, that never gets better. And I think it's important for the public to know this also. No system is perfect, just what you said, Rabbi Tzvi. But the fact of the matter is that this is the only thing that works. And
in order for a system to get better, people have to cooperate with the system. And I want to say something now, and I know it's a little bit off topic, but it's on topic.
Yeah, it's okay.
In almost every case that I've ever dealt with that child services was involved or ACS was involved, and the family worked with child protective services as opposed to against them and cooperated, there was very, very good results and healthy outcomes. It's when we're not letting them in the house, we're hiding something from them, we're going to lie. That's when the problems usually come out. And I say this from experience. So At the end of the day, step number one, people need to know, support line is anonymous. Step number one. Step number two, even if cases do have to be reported, if you work within the system can work. And there's very good components to that. And step number three is if chas v'shalom something more severe drastic action has to be taken, then there's usually a reason for that. So
Right,
that has to be
right.
kept in mind.
And that's the only thing. Unfortunately, we know that you can't frighten these people, and you can't scare them off, and you can't intimidate them to stop abusing. If they're abusing, that they need to be stopped. And the only ones that have the power to do this are the authorities. Nobody else. We know that this business of having a VAD watching them or people, it just doesn't work. We know it doesn't work.
And
You know,
especially
one of the
now,
things. Please.
I think especially now with the increase of number of cases,
Right.
and whether it's because of the quarantine or because of all these other things, we're getting a lot more calls. There's an askin that's going to help us, and this, and at the end of the day, you need professionals to help.
It doesn't work. It doesn't
Everybody.
work. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Reb David spoke, Reb David Shlita, for Reb David Cohen. For those who don't know, I would encourage you to go to Amudim's website, or just look up Reb David Cohen or Amudim. It was really, I think it's important for every parent, every educator, to anyone who's in public or as a citizen, to just go look at Reb David. Reb David spoke about the fact, he spoke right before Pesach, that a chayla nefesh, someone who has emotional issues, or he said specifically someone who's in recovery, and it's the next thing I want to talk about, they're considered that it's the same pikuach nefesh. It's treated the same in terms of Hilchos Shabbos, of setting aside the laws of Shabbos in order to save a person's life. It's exactly the same for a chayla nefesh, for somebody who's emotionally unwell or having emotional challenges, or someone who's in recovery. And Rab David specifically said recovery needs, and they need a meeting. To go to a meeting means, a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or for narcotics or other things, because the life, we know that this is it's a death sentence if they don't get their addiction treated. So Rab David spoke beautifully, and Rabbi Avikan did. I really encourage every single person listening, go look it up and have a look at this. But I want to talk specifically about the issue of relapsing and addiction, and I think people are looking, Tzvi, and the public out there. We're all looking for takeaways, and it, I don't know about you. I imagine we're the same, but when people say they figured out why it happens, I just like, oh my, run for the hills. This is why it's happening.
Everybody
Nobody
has
knows.
reasons. Everybody knows.
Right. There's not. We know that. I say I'm very suspicious of people who say they know why it happened, but we do have a serious obligation to reflect and say, what can we do differently and better as a result of this experience. And I think that one of the things that I spoke about a few weeks ago on one of my talks, and I'm going to I'm speaking for this Sunday. There's a beautiful program that Yeshivat HaKotel is doing. Also, it's called Vayichan, and my topic is going to be walking a mile in the shoes of people who are socially distant all the time. That people should understand being alone. I'm sorry, you like the topic?
I like it a lot.
Yeah, that's
I
my
love it.
title. Walking a mile in the shoes of people who are suffering from social distance all the time. And this is something, that's what I meant by a takeaway. We don't know why it happens, but once we're here and once we understand the fear of being alone and not having family, I just made a short video on this, and I said that the people, that my friends, those of us who have parents, in their 80s and 90s, the greatest terror that we have, besides for them not, getting sick, or passing away, is the way when the hospitals were overwhelmed, dying by themselves, and having a funeral, like that. And I said that it kills me to say this, but our kids who are harming themselves are living like that and dying like that and being buried like that. And we have a real obligation to reach out, understanding what it means to be socially isolated and be more welcoming. And one of the things that I did not write about yet, Rabbi, but I will, and I'm going to speak about this more, is having not had the shul experience for such a long time. I really wish that people would make a Kabbalah to stop the drinking in shul. Speaking of addiction, a good friend of mine was taught. We were talking before Purim a few years ago, and it really struck me because look, we're both in the field, and we think we've heard everything and known everything, and this woman who has a child who's struggling with addiction. She was saying that it's an intergenerational thing. People don't understand it affects 3 generations when somebody has an addiction, and what it's like for a parent waiting at home, God forbid, for that phone call when someone who's addicted doesn't come home, and I think that we all have a responsibility to be more empathetic about this whole addiction thing. When you have a kiddush club or you're having kiddush at home, and you're giving large amounts of alcohol out, imagine what it's like for someone who's struggling with an addiction. Imagine what it's like for the spouse of that person, for the children of that person. And I hope that's something that we will become more cognizant of, and be aware of what it means when we either get people started on drinking or provide them with a tremendous nisayon. So tell me a little bit about the relapsing, what's going on, and I imagine obviously with the stress going on and difficulty getting to a meeting. Go ahead, please tell the public, tell me what's going on.
So I'll break it down into a few different areas to try to simplify it as best as I can. Okay. So the first thing is we need to first understand that those that are struggling with addiction and those in recovery did not choose to be an addict. That's number one. It's an illness. Nobody woke up one morning, and I say this all the time, and said, I'm going to be an addict. That's number one. Number two is that we all know in the field, and the public should know this, that the relapse rates are very high. People do have a chance of falling off the wagon and going back to drugs and alcohol. So before we speak about how it's being affected by COVID-19, I mean, in addition, Rabbi Horowitz, you saw the video that Amudim put out a few years ago called The Kiddush Club. Again, available on Amudim's website, along with the video from. So, and we have another video, by the way, coming.
I always post your stuff. I love what you're doing. Go ahead, please.
We're putting out another video, by the way, this week on mental illness for Mental Health Awareness Month, but that we'll talk about afterwards. So first of all, issue number one is if somebody is having a drink and they offer their friend a drink and the person says no, guy or girl, please don't ask them again. For all you know, that person is in recovery. For all you know, that person has been struggling and now they're finally in a good spot. And don't be that person to cause that extra stress, that extra pressure, that peer pressure to cause them to go back to what they were doing. Whether it's a drink, whether it's a joint, whether it's a pill, that's Aleph. Okay. Now, as far as what we're seeing,
I'm sorry, Rabbi. I just want to point out, folks out there, the addiction rate, depending on the study and depending on the year, the addiction rate in the public is 1 in 12, 1 in 15, 1 in 10. That's the range. So I have no reason to think that it's any less in our community. And just imagine that means, let's make it real. Let's say let's say we have half that amount. So there's 1 in 25. So if you're in a shul with 200 people, you have 8 addicts there. 8 people whose families are terrified, and they are terrified of them falling. So when you're handling exactly what you said, Tzvi, make the numbers real. If you have 200 people in your shul, there are 8 people. Or if we're like the public, it's 16 that are struggling with an addiction that's a life or death matter. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'd love to get a person drunk again and get them back on a path to death. But that's what you're doing. Thank you for bringing it up, Tzvi. I'm sorry. Go, continue.
And by the way, I just mentioned that not only did Reb David Cohen say in the Psak Halacha that people can go to AA, NA meetings, Al-Anon, the spouses, the therapists, you can reach out to a sponsor, call a support line, but Shmuel Meir Katz, the Mashgiach, the Dayan of PMG in Lakewood, issued another video, which is even stronger than the one that Reb David Cohen said, where he actually used, and I quote, forget Shabbos, forget Yom Tov, forget Yom Kippur. If you need to get to a meeting or make sure you stay in a good spot, do what you need to do. Now, as far as what we're seeing now, I have to say this. We kept track for a long time of the overdose rate in our community. And I used to get into a lot of trouble when I would publicize another person died. I never gave a name, never gave details, but people got annoyed. I have to say that in the last 2 weeks, we've had 5 overdoses that I know about. And this is
Yeah.
after a quiet run. We've had at least 30 people that were sober for 4 years or longer that have fallen off the wagon, whether it's drugs, alcohol,
Yeah.
or other addiction.
Oh my goodness.
Using that as an example because they've had a good few years of sobriety. And it's coming as a result of, I don't know the reasons, but I could just tell you the trajectories. People being in the house, losing their jobs, stress from the family, stress from the kids, whatever it might be. So we're seeing a major increase in the relapse rates. And if anything, that means people need the help and need us more than ever. There are so many resources. I mean, at the end of the day, the one good thing that came out of this, and as strange as this sounds, is, I always love when people say, oh, I can't go to meetings, either because it's in a church, even though from any Rav that knows anything about addiction will tell you there's nothing wrong with going.
Absolutely. They all say go wherever it is. Absolutely. That's been my experience as well.
Or they'll say, I can't go to that meeting. There's other from people there. So that's the next one, which I also keep saying, if the other people are there, they're in the same boat as you, so don't worry. So the one good thing that came out of this is that there's so many Zoom and other methods. We have on our website alone, on our Corona tab on our page, we have links to every possible type of meeting that one could think of, literally, and fellowships from all over. So that's something that, but at the same time, help is available. And if somebody feels that they're struggling or they feel that they're going to slip up, reach out, call your sponsor, call the support line, call the Amudim Anonymous line, call Amudim, call whoever, call a therapist, call a friend. Don't go at it alone. It is so difficult. And for those that are living with people in recovery, your job is even harder. And I feel for you. And this is a message directly, because at the end of the day, not only are you managing everything else around your family, but trying to manage your loved one who's in recovery. But try to be as extra supportive as possible. The anxiety and the stress levels we're seeing today, I mean, again, I'm a young guy, but nothing that anyone I know has ever seen before. Yeah, maybe the financial component of the crisis we saw in 2008, but the overall global issues, relapse rates, overdose rates, attempted suicides, that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, like never before. Really, it's been.
This is nothing like any of us had in our lifetime.
And I can tell you, it's not slowing down. I mean, our numbers are increasing, and it's not just us. We're speaking to other mental health professionals. We have a Zoom meeting every week that's put together through the UJA with multiple mental health agencies, and we're all reporting the same thing. So this is just a major crisis. This is a pandemic of its own. Is really what it is.
And I think the public, by the way, what Tzvi mentioned about being supportive to someone who's in recovery that you know about, I think it's important that all of us that have public voices and have large social media followings, or, I think we have a responsibility, or I encourage you to think of it as a responsibility to publicize things like this. I just typed a note to myself from Tzvi to ask you for the link to those pages where you said about all those meetings. I made a note because I want to publicize it also. We need to know about this.
Not only is it the link to the page, it's an easy link to remember, and you also have the video of Rabbi Cohen on that link as well. It's amudim.org/help. Amudim.org/help. That's the link.
That's very.
We have another link, amudim.org/relax, has and techniques. We put out yesterday with animation. Sorry, go ahead, Rabbi.
No, please. There's a little delay here. Go ahead, Tzvi. Go ahead.
No, don't worry. We also put out some animation videos with techniques that are real life examples that I suggest everybody should watch. They're about 10 minutes long, but really powerful. But I also want to mention another thing. And there's, I happen to agree with you, Rabbi. We talk about the Kiddush clubs and what they represent. No, not agree. But we also have to remember, I always tell people my biggest issue with the Kiddush club isn't necessarily the drinking. It's the message you're teaching the next generation. It's more
That's
important to have a
right.
l'chaim than hear the speak or than hear the thing. But we also have to remember there's a major difference between moderation and prohibition also. And what for one person might be healthy for someone else may not be. And therefore, if somebody is not an addict and not in recovery, and they're okay having a glass of wine or having a l'chaim, that's one thing. Drink responsibly. But it becomes irresponsible not only on your own, but when you're pushing somebody else. And that's
Right.
something that really we need to drive home. And that's really, really
Right.
important.
Right. Thank you very much. Just one or two more things that I just wanted to talk about before we go, and it's really been it's really delightful to spend time with you in public, just as it is when we talk privately. But I want to talk about the 25 years ago, I was telling parents to mark the back of the liquor bottles. That was considered like very progressive at the time. I would go to a group of parents and I'd say, folks, get with the program. No, I would do a workshop. I did the first workshops in Rabbi Reisman's basement of his shul, where those original cassette tapes. That was 1996. I asked the parents there were a few hundred people there. I said, how many of you have teenagers who are drinking? See, maybe two hands went up. And I said, okay, here's the I had them together for it was 5 Tuesdays, and we did 2 hours a night, 2 topics. So I had them. So this was like the second or third week. I said, I'm going to check back with you next week. Here's your homework. Take a marker and just make a little mark on the back of the bottles, and just see how it was on. And please, let's report back next week. It was like,
You know
so
what that
that
reminds
was the
me of?
progressive. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no, continue, but then remind me to tell you the RCA story to that. It's a great story.
Go for it
But
now.
continuing,
Tell me.
so when Shalom Task Force first started, which is for victims of domestic violence, they had gotten a bunch of shul rabbis to agree through the RCA to speak from the pulpit about domestic violence.
Right.
And
That was a
the
big deal
joke
then.
it was, but the joke that said, by the way, Reb David Cohen then also used to get fire trucks sent to his house,
Yeah, sure
and
did.
pizza.
He sure did. Yep.
Always stuck his neck out. Amazing. But the joke that was said there was that these rabbis then came back the next week and said, you gave us all these problems. We never had issues in our congregation. And all of a sudden, you ask to discuss domestic violence and people are coming to us with problems. And I said this last time, I'll say it again. Where your brother's is the Mashgiach, where my son is going to yeshiva next year to May.
Tzaddik brother.
Rabbi Yafi, by the opening, Rabbi Yafi said, there's 2 types of high schools, those that have drugs in it and those that are in denial. And that's the reality today. So when you tell me 25 years ago, they shook their head, Rabbi, I hate to tell this to you. I was doing a lecture in a high school, in a mainstream Haredi high school. I'm not going to say which one, last year. And I asked the administration of the yeshiva, what issues do you think you have here? And they said a couple of kids smoke, maybe 5 or 6 vape, maybe 3 or 4 drink. I said, what about any drugs, anything more? Oh, no, not by us. We don't have those. Said, okay. So I asked them for permission if they can leave the auditorium and let me speak to the boys. And I promised the boys, everything you tell me now will be completely confidential. You have my word. And I threw out a couple of lines that indicate different types of drugs, narcotics, paraphernalia. And I got the reactions. And I then said, okay, let's talk straight. By the time I walked out of there, how is it that in the year 2019, that a principal in a boys' high school in a mainstream community is still convinced that these issues don't exist? And I got to say, don't get me wrong. We're definitely, and Rabbi Horowitz, I said this to you last time, I'll say it again. Ever since that first published article, Jewish Observer broke the mold, hit it hard when nobody was ready to do anything and you stood up there. But at the end of the day, we're light years ahead of where we were then. But we still have so much more.
We still have so much to go. And one of the sergeant, when in 1998, I heard that they were from kids dealing drugs. The kids told me that they were from kids dealing, and I think it's important for the public to know this too, in terms of the public policy message. So Rabbi Sheres Zatzal was still alive. It was must have been 97, the beginning of 98. He actually ran. He ran the meeting from his hospital bed. He ran him. I said, I want to speak at a Mayatzis meeting and ask if I should go to the authorities with this. This was in 1997 or 8. And I went to check. Check that it was true. And then I went to Rabbi Sheres Zatzal and we spoke. And unanimously, everybody said I must go to the authorities. And I didn't know anything about drugs. Like, well, I'm a yeshiva guy. So I marched myself into the 70th precinct the next day. And I went to this front desk. I said, I need a drug Rebbe. I said, I need a teacher. I said, a Rebbe is a teacher. I said, I need a drug teacher. Who on staff here can tell me what I need to know quickly? And they gave me they assigned a sergeant who was in youth division, which is, is more preventative and works with the public. And he gave me an education and it was very important that for us and it was, and one of the Rosh Yeshiva came to me at the next Aguda convention when I spoke about this and asked me what to do. I said, two people in the yeshiva need to know what marijuana smells like. I told this to Rosh Yeshiva. I said, two people need to know. This person had 30 years on Tzvi. And I said, somebody in the building needs to know what pot smells like, and somebody in the building needs to know what someone coming off a cocaine high is. I said, I have a drug Rebbe. I'll send them over. And he said, do it. And he set it up. He said, I want it to be in my office. I don't want the Rabbi. He had two young Rabbeim. And he said, if this is what my Talmidim are dealing with, and this, you'd flip if I told you who it was. Top tier yeshiva. And his quote was, he said, if this is the Nisayon, the temptations that my students are dealing with, I have a responsibility to know everything I need to know. And I think that's really the message that we should all take away. So back to my the question, I wanted to know, what's the 2020 equivalent of marking the back of the bottle? Okay, if that was then, and now with vaping and other things, what do parents need to know? If you're my drug Rebbe now, Tzvi, tell me, or tell the parents out there, what do they need to know as parents that they don't know, because I don't expect them to know? What do they need to know that's changed beyond that marking the bottle? What's it today in terms of vaping or pills or other things like that? What do they need to know? Go ahead, please.
Unfortunately, that's a much longer answer than what we're going to have, but I will give it the best shot I could. Number one, kids are very smart and resilient. I could bring you a full bottle of a soda bottle that has the exact same color of an alcoholic beverage, and the kids already know how to refill what bottle with what alcohol to know what's what. So that's number one.
I'm sorry, what do you mean what's what? What's what? Meaning they use Sprite for this one and this for that?
I have this bottle of water, right? So let's assume that it's a yellow Powerade, okay? And I know exactly which alcohol is the same color as that Powerade. Kids are filling up the Powerade bottles with the alcohol, not to know. So that's Aleph. The second big concern today is because of the vaping, a lot of the smell, specifically those that are vaping wax, marijuana or other substances that our technology is helping them figure out, that the ability to know how to smell it is no longer as prevalent as it used to be. So what I say is as follows. Number one, know your child. See if there's a behavior difference in pattern changes in behavior, change of friends, change of attitude. And it's subtle, small changes. But again, if you don't know your children, then you're not going to know those answers. The other thing I say is specifically with alcohol, and I say this proudly. I mean, the same way, and we'll get to that in a second, but, don't keep your alcohol on a display case, showing it off to your kids. If somebody wants to make a l'chaim for Shabbos, take it out of the liquor cabinet, pour it, put it back in. Shouldn't be the highlight that, look, I was sitting Eretz Yisrael a few years ago, Sukkos, and these yeshiva bachurim were busy telling me which bottles of wine and what years and this vintage and that, and they were mumchayim and experts in everything that they knew. And I was shocked. Now, I'm in the industry already a number of years, and I was shocked. And I wrote a whole op-ed about it when I got back from Eretz Yisrael after Sukkot, and I got attacked from everybody. But at the end of the day, if we know our children, we'll notice these subtle changes in behavior, and we'll be able to then reach out to an expert. By the way, reaching out to an expert, and I'm going to say this, is not something to be embarrassed about. A lot of the phone calls that we get at Amudim are just questions. Parents, I saw this. What do you suggest we do? How that? And, at the end of the day, that's what's important. Now, let me just go back just for a second to the Corona component of this, because that's really what we're starting to see now is, a lot of things that are starting to come out, especially parents that were in denial about what their children were doing, whether it's on the internet, whether it's with pornography, whether it's with certain games they were staying up all night. So, all of a sudden now they're with their kids the whole day and they're starting to notice things more, is know how to speak to your children also. Don't push them further away, bring them closer in. And as far as me personally, and I said this on our last conversation, I'll say it again now. There's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. I myself am proud to admit it publicly. I go to therapy, not embarrassed about it. It's extremely important. I need it, especially in my line of work. I probably should have gone many years prior. And it's something that is real. And what we're seeing is real. And the level of pressure. So I have to say, my message is really as follows. Let's love those that need to be loved. I wrote in a tweet, we might be socially distant, but let's try to be as digitally connected as possible and reach out. If you know somebody's alone, if you know somebody's struggling, if you know somebody, needs a little bit extra support, pick up the phone. I mean, I was on a thing today with Mayor K. We did a quick 15-minute small video meeting. And I made a comment that I said, my days are now literally, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm working 16 to 18 hours a day. I'm literally no life right now. Yesterday, I literally took 20, 25 minutes and I just started going through my phone. I started calling some old friends just to say hello. I needed it for me.
That's good.
Forget about anybody else. I needed it for me. So there should be nothing embarrassed about it. And all the information, the phone number to the American support line, which people can access from anywhere in the world. You don't have to be in America to call. It's just open from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yes, I'm going to remind you, Yom Tif is coming up now. Shavuos, it's going to be open as well. Shabbosim, it's open. The phone number to the Israel line, an email to get help, all the different videos we've put out. They're all on amudim.org. And people don't have to be embarrassed or shy to reach out. These are troubling times for everybody. They're difficult. They're trying. Yes, the domestic violence rates are increasing. We're hearing it from Dr. Friedman, from Shalom Task Force. We're seeing it ourselves from our own cases. Child abuse is increasing. People that are struggling with addiction are struggling more than ever. That means they need us more than ever. We as a community, we band together. And, my wife always likes to say this, Jews are best like tea bags. When they're in hot water is when they work. Let's not have to make it that way. We shouldn't have to get there. Let's try to be there for one another. That's what's important. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's something that people used to always make comments. Well, all these different months, what's the purpose of awareness? That, you know what? Because that's what's needed.
Very important.
Because the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is, the more people can reach out for help. And I say, Rabbi Horowitz, you've been a trailblazer for many, many years. And really, but, and have taken many hits over the years, a lot more than I have. And some of your hits have because of me.
I took it for the team. I took it for the whole team, Tzvi.
I was going to say, I'm going to ask you publicly for Mechila for the few situations that got you into big hot water as a direct or indirect result of my schlepping you into a case,
That's good.
But
That's good,
it's just something that, we need to know. People, another thing I need to remind people, and I don't want this to come out sounding bad, and I happen to have smicha. I don't practice as I'm not paskening shilas, but I have to be careful with these words, but I have to say it anyway. Das Torah by Klal Yisrael is very important. We all agree to that. But the Das Torah have to be ones that are knowledgeable in these areas. And I'm going to use the following example. Before Reb David Cohen issued this psak, this groundbreaking psak, publicly posted on all the websites, videos everywhere, most people that had a mental health issue would have reached out to their rabbi, but they wouldn't have, even individually, because they were too embarrassed. How do I call my rabbi and say, I have severe anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts, and I'm struggling with addiction, and can I use a phone on a Shabbos, or can I go to a meeting that I have to get to in either driving or tchum or whatever it might be? People would have never even asked. They were too embarrassed. So what was such a breakthrough with this video was that, first of all, it helped mainstream that these issues are real, and now it's a psak for everybody. We have received hundreds of emails, messages, posts on our website, you name it. Thank you so much. I've been having this problem for years. I didn't know what to do. Just the fact that it was out there. And if the Rabbanim can get out and destigmatize mental health and, or emotional well-being, as we spoke last time, we want to try to change the terminology to a more positive terminology, which I agree with. It's got to start with us. So it's got to start with understanding that while Torah is important, if somebody goes to a Rav who doesn't understand addiction or abuse, mental illness, then you got to find another Rav. Really go to a professional. There are those that won't listen to me when I say that. They only want to go to the Rav. So if somebody has to go to a Rav, which I'm not saying not to, go to a Rav that knows. All too
and it's
often
okay,
we get,
and it's okay that they don't know. Not every Rav has to know about all these things, or you know what I'm saying. Not let them do it. It's not. There's nothing wrong. You're not diminishing their kavod by saying that they're not knowledgeable in this area. You're absolutely right. There's nothing. It's not disrespectful in any way. Before we go, I just want to inform the public of that. This series is interview with Rabbi Tzvi, and we're calling it Tools for Living and Parenting. This is the 5th in the series. And we have some really we're starting again at the beginning of June. We have some really exciting and interesting adult education for parents about a wide range of topics. The first one we're doing, I actually have a fantastic college teacher who mentors, hundreds of young married women. The title is What Your Married Kids Wish You Knew. Explaining to parents my age. You like that? That's the second smile I got.
You know what? No, because Baruch Hashem, I'm married 17 years, but there's still things I wish that my parents, would
right?
know.
Exactly, right? And how it's different raising kids today. So that's one of the topics. I have a YouTube channel. It's Yakov Horowitz. I've been posting a lot of new material there. I really encourage you to go there. We did a talk with an anxiety specialist, Rabbi Dr. Schwartz, Zahava Farbman who's world famous on bereavement. Dr. David Hertzberg from Shiva Flatbush did a talk on technology, and Elliot Lassen, who lives in Baltimore, has been doing job placement and career counseling for over 30 years. He's talking about adults who are displaced from work, finding work, and helping your teenagers get a job. So we have a whole series coming. I'm also doing something that I'm really excited about. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time. And what I'm doing is usually, I lecture all over the place. And usually it's a one-off. I go for a Shabbos, I do an evening. I'm doing a deep dive into teenagers, into parenting teenagers. And it's starting the first Tuesday after Shavuos. It's going to be Tuesday, June 2nd. And I really encourage everyone, it's going to be on Zoom. So I'm limiting the amount of people on it because I want to be able to do question and answer. So originally it was 25. We have almost 100 people already registered for the classes. And it's going to be, what I'm doing is, I think it's really important because we don't often get a chance to do this. I'm doing first theory, explaining adolescence, how it works, then practice. How that information, the research about adolescents, how their brains develop, how they think differently, how that could govern to make you your practice to make you more effective. And then I'm going to go topic by topic by topic. And I'm really excited about it. It's going to be up on YouTube afterwards. I already started preparing the presentations, and I really think I really encourage parents to avail yourselves of it. I basically closed registration down, but I just posted today that any single parents or any parents who are blending families get an automatic in, because I realized I did in honor of my mother, who was a single mother for 2 years, last summer for 2 years, and the wonderful man she married. They blended families amazingly well. I know what the challenges are, so I encourage you to reach out. And my last thing is, when you see Tzvi and I'll speak for myself. Those of you who are raising teenagers, the personality package that allows Tzvi and I to do all these things that we do and work all these hours and get a lot of stuff done, thinking out of the box, think of the packages that the two of us have. We're different, but we're very similar in these ways. When we were 13 years, I'll speak for me, forget it. When I was 13 years old, all of these personality profiles, if you don't care what other people think about you, and you're willing to say things if you want, you're willing to speak your truth, to go to a Gluck convention like in front of 4,000 people and say we have a teen at risk problem, that might not do that well with you when you're in 8th grade. So I just encourage play the long game, folks.
Rabbi,
If you have.
Sorry to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off, but you knew me when I was 13. So
I didn't say it.
I have no I have no problem saying it. And I'm not going to be promoting what I did, but going to 14 high schools in 3.5 years is no small feat.
Tzvi, I got up at a Gluck convention of Tzvi. I got up at a Gluck convention. I said it in 1998 with people on the Me'etzes there and hundreds of Rabbanim and thousands of people. I said, at 13 years old, I said I was lucky that I went to school at a time that they gave us time to work through stuff. And you really, if you had a pulse, you got into a yeshiva. I'm a couple of years older than you. So, I turned around and I said, Rabbi Say, with Yiras HaKavod and Derech Eretz, none of you would have taken me into yeshiva today the way I was when I was 13. If I was 13 in 1998, I would not get into any of your yeshivas. And you're turning away kids who have the potential to do things like that. So any parents, if you have restless kids who are high energy and spunky and have a hard time sitting still and speak their truth, be nice to them. They're going to take care of you when you get old. They're going to be the ones you turn to.
Let's also remind the parents of one other thing also. Be open with your kids. Talk to them. Have a relationship with them. I watched that last video that you did, Rabbi, about whether your kids' friends or not. We're not going to go into that. I know we're out of time.
I missed that. I'm sorry. What?
You're on your back deck. You see, living out the Muncie gives the benefit that somebody can be sitting on their back.
I decided to go. It's such a beautiful night. Yeah. I decided to go. I guess. What did you say? I'm sorry.
I know that we're running out of time. I said, I know we're running out of time, and I saw the video that you just did recently where you and your wife, Sazan Gesund, she should stay by your side at Me'ev Astrim Shana with health and everything, about kids being friends, parents. But let me just say this. This is a message to parents and to myself as well. Have an open, honest conversation and relationship with your children. Talk to them. If you have a good relationship with them, they'll feel comfortable to talk to you. And honesty is important. We think we're hiding things from our kids. Our kids know more than we think they know, the same way we know more than we thought our parents knew. And it just continues. So I urge everybody, please join Rabbi Horowitz's group. And Rabbi Horowitz, I'm going to make this offer now publicly. If you need more seats on the Zoom and we have to give you access to one of the Amudim Zoom accounts so that you can have more people, I will offer that to you at your disposal so you can keep doing what you're doing. And thank you for having me, Rabbi. Really, it's always.
It was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure. Actually, Tzvi, by the way, we could go till tomorrow morning. We're going to stop right now. But one of the talks, Tzvi, in my series, in the deep dive into parenting, is would your kids tell you, with a question mark? Would your kids tell you exactly what you said? And the question is, your kid's getting into trouble. Are you one of those 5 or 10% that the kids will come to you and say, Mom, Dad, Mommy, Tati, Abba, Ima, I'm having stuff. Can we talk about it? And the only way you get to that, I'm going to talk about that for an hour, what you can do to position yourself so that it happens. Tzvi, it was so delightful. We got to do this again. Thank you so much for joining. I hope everybody out there went away with at least some nuggets of information. Mazel and bracha to everyone. Thank you for listening.
All the best. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Have a good night.
Be well.
Be well. Bye.